Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about some WWE 2K18 stuff because as you guys know, I have a bunch of information that I can release to you guys very soon from my trip to 2K where we talked about WWE 2K18 and what's to come for this year, and I can release that information on Wednesday. So there will be a video on Wednesday with all that information about WWE 2K18. But, you know, I went up there and they basically had a dev summit and they said, hey, what's wrong with the game? And, you know, as you know, I got a lot of things wrong with WWE 2K17 and the genre as it is. Now, a lot of you guys know that I've been up to 2K a lot. I usually go, well, I've pretty much been the last 4 or 5 years to 2K to talk about the future of the game and give them my thoughts on the series and things like that. And it's been a long time since I've done like a sit-down video like this with you guys. And I thought I would just do this because a lot of people would ask me. They said, you know, Pulse, what did you tell them at 2K? So I thought I would go over my entire list. Out of everybody there, I think I had pretty much the longest list, and I talked the longest, so there was a lot of stuff that I had to get off my chest about this game. I didn't sugarcoat any of it. You can ask anybody there. I pretty much put the pedal to the metal when it came to what was wrong with this game and what I thought they needed to do and maybe some things they should add. Because usually, as you guys know, I always advocate for a more arcadey style game, but it's obvious that they're not going to do that. You know, it's obvious that we're not going to go really step back anymore into the arcade realm of stuff. So I decided this year to take it a little bit away from that because usually every year when I go to 2K, I always, you know, I always talk about the treadmills and all that kind of stuff. But this year I was like, okay, there were some legitimate issues that I had with 2K17 and the series in general. And I was like, okay, this year I'm going to take it serious. I'm going to put the pedal to the metal and we're going to do this. So I'm going to go through my list of stuff that I told 2K, try to give you the information. When I sat and I talked to 2K, they didn't interrupt me. They didn't interrupt what I was saying. They didn't stop me to say, hey, this didn't happen because of X. Or, you know, they didn't, you know, most of the time if you tell somebody, hey, this sucks, they're going to go, hey, this is why it sucked. Or, you know, especially when it comes to game development. 2K didn't do that. They sat there and they took it to the head. Every single thing I had to say, positive or negative, they just straight up took it to the head. So I have to give them that. But anyways, I walked in. We had a round table with a bunch of people. And it was pretty neat, you know. It was a roundtable of creators and press and just a few other people. It was, you know, so it was a pretty diverse group of people. And they basically sat us down and said, "Hey, what sucks?" And I'm like, "You asked the right question to me." So when it came to me, I started off, and I really like to. I surrounded what I had to say around two things, and that was longevity of the series and direction, because I feel like that's two things that WWE 2K17 lacked in particular. Longevity, people gave up on this game way earlier than they did 2K16 or even 2K15 or even 2K14. I feel like people gave up on 2K17 before the DLC even dropped. I don't even think that a lot of people came back for the DLC. I know people that bought the DLC and didn't even come back. So longevity of the series is a huge issue that they really need to talk about, especially when it comes down to my career, which is my big focus for this, and just some other things. So that's what I started off when it came to me. What I started off, I tried to be as professional as possible with it. So I really came down to like a list and things that I felt like needed to be capitalized on, like longevity and direction. Because I felt like direction-wise, this game had none either. You know, my career was just a mindless run-through of the game over and over and over again, with no real end game that you cared about or were even going to get to, because most people are not going to play 15 years of my career. And I felt like the game itself was just lacking direction. So I started off with, you know, longevity. What can add longevity to this series in itself, right? And the first thing I said was, I think something like a challenge mode would be pretty cool. You know, just coming off of playing Injustice 2 and the multiverse and all that stuff, which adds stuff to the game. Like being me, like I finished Injustice 2. And then they came out with a multiverse where you could unlock the Wonder Woman DCEU attire. And I went, okay, well, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to go play Injustice and I'm going to go unlock this thing. So that adds longevity to the game, you know? So I propose like a ladder system almost, where maybe a mode where you face different wrestlers on like a stupid hard difficulty. You know, maybe some of the ladders are easier, some of them are harder. They reset every week or so with. Maybe even some of the ladders have different difficulty handicaps. Like maybe one of the ladders is beat John Cena with AJ Styles with the screen flickering or the controls inverted or something like that, you know? Just different weekly stuff that makes people come back and pick the game up and go, I can't wait to do that this week. Just adding longevity to the game. Like I said, like a ladder system almost like Injustice 2 would be great. Just something like where you take a guy, maybe it's a specific guy for that ladder, and you face people in a row. It gets harder and harder, maybe, or something like that, you know. And I think that would easily bring people back. Maybe a leaderboard for quickest completion of a ladder. You know, maybe one of the ladders every week is like the toughest one, and there's a leaderboard for that, or just something like it's it needs a new mode outside of, hey, can we bring back GM mode? Hey, can we, you know, my career and universe? There's got to be something new, because we can't just keep taking out GM mode and adding GM mode back. You know what I mean? Now, I did talk about some little things like stuff like the manager's writing on the ATV. Like the game has to feel like, because right now it just feels like you and your manager are completely separate people. You just happen to be in the arena at the same time. I think if they did stuff like ride the ATV with you, and if they were with you a little more in general, it just, you know, right now it's like you enter on the ramp and they're like all the way over there, and they're like, hey, you know, I thought just for immersion purposes, you know, just stuff like that, and because I use the ATV entrance, and I really wanted that. So this is where well, I guess before I dive into my career, which is one of the big things that I talk about, some of the little baby things that I mentioned were a female my career, because I know there's a lot of women out there that want to play these games, and especially with the resurgence of women in the WWE, I think, you know, they should probably do that. I said maybe some silly entrances, like a Rainmaker pose entrance, you know, like Okada in New Japan, or even a LeVar Ball mocap entrance. I did mention that. I said I was going to mention it, and I mentioned it. Being able to throw people over the top rope if your character clears it, you know, not like going over the ropes and then tossing them over. I mean, like if I do like so in 2K17, you can kick somebody, right? And you grab them into a powerbomb position and you powerbomb them. So if their character clears the top rope, they should probably go over the top rope. You know, there shouldn't be like an invisible wall there. I also mentioned my combo system, which I bring up every single year. It has yet to be implemented, but I think eventually, if I keep mentioning it, it might be implemented. The combo system, where if you do, like, you know, wrestling has evolved over the past 10 years. We're no longer doing one move. You know, we're no longer doing a suplex and sitting in a rest hold for 10 minutes. I mean, some wrestlers aren't. So having a move like a super kick or a forearm or anything like that, being able to stun your opponent and then combo into a different move. Maybe some characters have specific combo moves, you know. I think that would be really, really neat. You know, being able to super kick someone and not knock them down, but he like stuns them backwards. And then you as a player decide what you want to do next. You know, maybe that super kick stuns them and then you go into a finisher. Maybe you go into a torture rack. You know, it just opens up a realm of possibility that wasn't there before, to make you feel like you're playing the game. Because that's a huge issue with the game right now to me, is that the game itself feels like you're not playing it. There's not enough player-controlled mayhem in the game. It feels very linear in that sense, in that the video game is playing itself almost. Everything that happens is like it's going to happen eventually anyways. There has to be some sort of player-controlled mayhem. Like in the older games, being able to jump off an 18-wheeler, or, you know, it wasn't just a cutscene off of the 18-wheeler. You jumped off of the 18-wheeler and stuff like that. You know, you did these things. So just stuff like that. Of course, I mentioned story designer and rematches when you lose titles in my career, stuff like that. But anyways, let's get into my career thing, because I had a whole spiel about this. For the love of God, let us face other people in my career, because there's a million people in the game right now, but it feels like you're inside of a vacuum. There feels like you're only facing 5 or 10 people the entire, like, 15 years of my career facing off against Baron Blade and Kevin Owens. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody. They did acknowledge that that is a huge problem, because everyone brought it up. You face the same people 100,000 times. I want them to give an actual upside to the goals in my career, because there's no point in doing the goals right now other than doing one main goal, you know. Maybe give the player an alternative ending to the game based on how many goals you get done. Or maybe if you do one of the side goals, it gives you a boost up in the rankings or something. Anything that you can do to the goals, because there's no direction for the goals right now. You know, they added in the Paul Heyman guy challenge, and they basically just said, here you go. That's all it is. Like, it's just like, do this and nothing happens. You know, like, it's just, it's crazy. There needs to be direction in my career. There needs to be upsides to doing things. There needs to be incentive. So that's one of the things that I mentioned. I think that there should be injuries in my career. I mean, people get injured all the time in real life. Hideo Itami cannot stop getting injured. You know, sometimes as a wrestler, you just miss out on stuff. Sometimes your pushes get stalled. You know, I think it would just be a great addition to my career to add to that immersion factor, you know. If you get injured, it simulates until you recover. The champions change. The whole realm of WWE has changed while you have been injured. You know, like things change. Maybe add a video package of you coming back in a jean jacket. You know, It's a Beautiful Day playing in the background. The crowd's cheering, they're roaring, you're back. You know, like maybe just adding something silly like that. Just an animation of your character coming back and getting a huge pop from the crowd, and then it returns you to the game, and just stuff like that. CPUs should be able to get injured. You injure somebody, you don't see them for a couple weeks or months or years, depending on how serious this injury is, till they recover. Add an injury list on the main menu with how many weeks they're out, why they're out, who did it. You know, just stuff like that to add to the immersion of the game. Maybe even give players an option to injure somebody on purpose, and it adds just a ton to their heal meter. You know, they're a face, and then all of a sudden they injure somebody, and now they're just uber heal, you know? Just stuff like that. That would obviously need to be like monitored, because it'd be very easy for them to mess this up, and all of a sudden you're injured for 20 years, and you're always getting injured. You know, every match goes to an injury or something. It would need to be a little tinkered with a little bit, but I think that they could do something good with this. I would love to be able to skip the intros in my career, because I love the intros in my career. Don't get me wrong, but it gets annoying super quickly, especially as a content creator. Like, I understand that it's loading something behind the intro screen, but when you're playing this game for hours on end, you know, you're playing this game for hours a day, trying to grind through my career, this 15-year endless cycle of facing Baron Blade and Kevin Owens, and 1/3 of the time is spent listening to on and on and on and on, and you're like, stop! You know, like, you just are done. It just gets a little too much. Maybe add, there was this thing back in the day in the main menu where you could fight a wrestler or fight an NPC, maybe something like that. Just something silly for a loading screen, especially for the amount of loading that 2K17 had. You know, it was just crazy. Also, I think you should be able to skip shows entirely in my career. But when you skip shows in my career, I think that you know, the hot meter is a big thing on whether you're getting pushed up the rankings or not. I think if, you know, you should be able to skip them. It changes your hot meter because you're not on TV. You know, if you're off TV, you're skipping these shows, you're not on TV. So most of the time, I don't even want to play the main event shows. You know, I just want to do Raw or SmackDown and call it a week. You know, that's just how I just want to do the one main show that I want to focus on, and I want to go to the next week. So, you know, maybe figure out a way to do that without messing too much up, because you don't want to skip like 20 years and have no repercussions to that. So maybe do something with your hot meter or your multiplier or your t-shirt sales, or just some sort of downside to simulating these shows. But I think, you know, that would be great, because like I said, sometimes I don't want to do main event. I swear to God, there is a curse on main event where everybody kicks out of everything 20 times more. Let me see. Okay, so you don't feel like a champion in my career. It feels like once you become champion, it's the same as when you weren't champion. You know, you face the same person every single pay-per-view, which is a huge issue, you know. Won the Intercontinental Championship, whoever's the #1 contender at that time, Kofi Kingston. I'm literally only facing Kofi Kingston every pay-per-view forever. That's a huge problem. So maybe change it up to where you feel a little different as a champion, you know. Maybe being able to do open challenges, like go to a week, you know, maybe on Raw or SmackDown, even main event, whatever champion whatever championship is on the show, whatever champion you are, being able to go to the show and be like, I'm having an open challenge, and a random member of the roster comes out and challenges you. Maybe someone from NXT that's not on the main roster comes out, or maybe one of your friends from your friends list is one of the guys that come out. You know, that would just be something cool that you could do as a champion. Give the champion options that you don't have when you're the non-champion, you know? That also helps with immersion. You know, immersion is a big thing with these simulation style games. You know, you want to be immersed in these sim games. So, like, the biggest things that I focused on were immersion, direction, and longevity. I think that you should be able to edit characters' outfits and other things right inside of my career. You know, right now you can edit a few things in the main menu that carry over to my career, but I think having like a full control of the attires would be great. It's especially for potential tag teams in my career. Because, yeah, I can change my outfit to match the tag team guy, But, you know, sometimes my outfit's already lit. I'm trying to keep my outfit, and I want to change the other guy's outfit. Stuff like that. Being able to change your tag name and entrance straight in my career menu, you know. Tag teams, honestly, as a whole, just feel very forgotten about. The tag teams in my career just seem like a side thing. It's like, oh, you do this tag team until you're done. You get the tag team title, and you just get rid of them, you know. I feel like that should be something that you look into. So, my career is all about adding immersion, fixing things, adding things, trying to get longevity onto this game, direction. I could have easily just gone like, you know, add treadmills, do this, do that. But I was like, I really have a lot of ideas that I think are good. I think a lot of people would enjoy. I have a lot of problems that need to be addressed. So I really went at him with this stuff. Like, I didn't sugarcoat anything. I pretty much just went to him straight up. I was like, this sucks, and we got to move forward. You know, we really gotta work on this stuff. Outside of my career, like, the big moments in the game feel a little too canned for me, if that makes any sense to you guys. Like, back during Here Comes the Pain, you could, like I mentioned earlier, you can climb to the top of an 18-wheeler, and RVD can do a 1190 moon bomb off of the 18-wheeler. You know, in 2K, it's just this cutscene that never changes, and you're not in control of. You just press R1 and triangle, and it's just like, well, there you go. You know, I'm not saying take away the OMG moments. I think they're awesome. Like, I think the OMG moments are cool. But more player-controlled mayhem would be good, especially with people like Braun Strowman flipping ambulances and stuff nowadays. There should definitely be some more player-controlled mayhem in this game. And then, personally, I was never really against the 2K Showcase. I never really had an issue with it. I think, you know, for a lot of people that aren't, you know, that buy these games and don't really keep up with WWE as much as us, I think 2K Showcase was a fun mode for them to play. Every time that I played with somebody that wasn't super into these games or they're like, oh, this is cool, like the 2K Showcase, you know, oh, it's Stone Cold, stuff like that. So I got what they did it for, and I was never really against it. But I do believe that if we're going to take it out, and that's a big thing with this series, if we're going to take it out, keep it out. You know, stop the whole taking something out and then bringing it back later has plagued this series for years. We're not making any progress here. Nothing's happening. You know, if we're decide, are you going to do this with this series or not? You know, I personally believe that a one-time linear game mode is absolutely needed in these games. You know, Universe ain't cutting it. My career ain't cutting it. There needs to be a one-time linear game mode to just put more meat on the bone of this series. I think there should be this linear original story that 2K writes, and it should be in the game. Something like Day of Reckoning 2 or SmackDown vs. Raw. These story modes are cheesy as hell, don't get me wrong. People will laugh when they first see it, and they'll go, oh, this is so stupid. But then, you know, 10 years from now, when we look back at these games, there'll be people that go, dude, do you remember that time that, you know, you played against Chris Jericho, and he wrote your name on the list, and then, like, you know, something happened, like it put you in your underwear or something, like in front of the crowd, like his list is magical or something. Just something silly. Like, it doesn't even have to be that silly. I'm just going off on a tangent at this point. But I mean, you know, if there was something like that people can call back to, when people think of these games, they're not going to go, do you remember that time I booked something in universe mode? You know, they're not going to, you know, stuff like that. I think that a one-time linear mode, regardless of if it's only a couple hours long, just something like that adds just so much to these games. And I can't advocate enough for something like that. You know, Day of Reckoning. That, you see how many people are playing these old wrestling games, and you go back and you're like, dude, this is ridiculous. It's awesome. I love it. Yeah. So that was pretty much what I told to 2K. Pretty much exactly. Honestly, I think I almost word for word did that on some of that. But like I said, I didn't sugarcoat anything. You know, a lot of people were always upset with me about only talking about arcade stuff. But I mean, at the end of the day, you know, that's kind of what I want in the series, is more arcadey stuff. And I'm fine with the sim gameplay. Don't get me wrong. I think the gameplay is probably some of the best it's been ever. But I would like more arcade elements in the game. But this year, there was just so much wrong with this game that I said, nope, nope. We're doing it big this year. So I went in there with a point. And I gave it to them, and it's up to them to see where this series goes. So anyways, guys, like I said, there'll be more information on Wednesday about 2K18 coming out. I just thought that you guys would like to hear what I said to 2K when I went out there. You know, a lot of people knew I went out there and were interested in what happened. So anyways, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Remember, leave that thumbs up if you did. Subscribe if you guys are not subscribed for more of that WWE goodness on my channel. And I'll see you guys next time. See ya.